Malinowski to take the chair and then ask his question after Ms. Spanberger. Ms. Spanberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here today. As follow-up to my colleague, Mr. Levin's comment, I want to give you the opportunity to perhaps correct what it is you said. The statement related to Jamal Khashoggi's murder, a Virginia resident, you said his murder was prosecuted in a fashion that needs to be addressed. It is my hope that the department doesn't think that any state-sponsored murder that happens in a consulate is ever one that is perhaps just discussed related to how it was actually prosecuted. I hope that you'll denounce that murder. Would you like to take the opportunity to do that now?
Thank you. We have denounced the murder, and of course, we would never abide by state-sponsored acts like that. So no, there's no daylight on that one.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper, in your testimony, you've repeatedly referred to the need to provide our partners in the region with defensive capabilities. In fact, you say specifically this is not intended to be an escalatory military step, and yet many of the 22 cases are distinctly offensive weapons, including the paveway precision-guided munitions, or smart bombs. We have a picture of that weapon system right here. Can you explain to me the disconnect to why we're providing offensive and extremely lethal weapons for apparently defensive purposes?
Thank you. So as far as weapons capability, we want to make sure that not only these partners in the region, if they are actually carrying equities for us, that it's not a matter of just their own sovereignty, but ensuring that they are providing protection for our equities. So it isn't just a matter of saying we want to make sure that your sovereignty is protected. They are carrying weight for us. As far as precision aspect, as discussed earlier, it is contributing to what would be considered the improvement or targeting integrity in any realm to ensure that the target is actually the one that is supposed to be hit is hit versus a categorical or a less precise target.
Okay, so let's talk about that targeting integrity. With the next image we have here, this is actually a school bus that was hit by one of these paveways. More than 40 children died when this precision-guided weapon hit a school bus. More than 50 people killed, more than 40 of them school children. So when we're talking about the offensive weapons that we deem, that the department now deems is in an emergency exigent circumstance, one that the department chooses to circumvent the congressional power, Article 1 of the Constitution, which gives us the authority to approve weapon sales of these types of weapons to entities that will commit mass atrocities like this. I just want to make sure we're clear on the level of lethality that we're discussing. And that brings me to a point. You've referred multiple times to a protracted process, and I would remind you, sir, that the protracted process you are bemoaning is in fact the constitutional process that we as members of Congress have a responsibility to exercise when we are selling our weapon systems that are this lethal to countries abroad, be they allies or otherwise. And you've specifically said this is a one-time event, but I would note that there is nothing specified in this statute that says the department can have this one-time circumvent effort around constitutional authority. Are you committing to this being a one-time event?
One-time event is conditions-based, but I will tell you, if you look at the history and the precedent, this is only the 5th time in 40 years that this has been applied. The first time was in 1979 during the Carter administration. This is only the 5th time. So it is, you're right, it is highly unusual. The circumstances are unusual, but it is a part of that toolkit for diplomatic deterrence.
So I would also note, having spent time in national security myself, these are not toolkits for diplomatic returns. These are toolkits for more aggressive, offensive natures. And speaking of offensive, the U.S. is supporting the Saudi offensive efforts against the Houthis. But where does that lead us? We've talked a lot about Iran. We've talked a lot about the escalation with Iran. We're now supplying these weapons to Saudi Arabia and another number of other partners in the Gulf, including fighter jets, precision-guided munitions, anti-tank missiles. What is it we're preparing for, sir? I did attend that classified briefing as well. There was no clear discussion that some major incident was imminent, and therefore the need to circumvent Congress. What is it we're preparing for that we are arming our allies in the region with this many offensive weapons?
On readiness and capability, we can talk further in a closed brief. I'd also say there are some threat streams that are not just directly tied to U.S. interest. I was able to talk about one here today because it was open source. So the attack on the international airport in Saudi Arabia.
That happened today, more than 2 weeks after this emergency declaration was put in place?
But I'm using that as an example in an open forum of that's not unique. So we do need to have a further conversation about those types of impacts and capital I impacts. So threat streams definitely are a factor, but it's not, when I say streams, it's direct threats to us, the indirect threats to us via proxies and other locations outside the region, and then direct threats to our partners in the region.
And many of my colleagues have raised the issue of this being a general trend that we're seeing out of this administration to circumvent the responsibility of Congress. And I would like to, again, note for the record that we also have constitutional responsibility as it relates to any aggressive war-making actions, be it with Iran or anyone else. So I hope that if the administration is indeed trying to prepare itself for any sort of offensive hostilities, they will begin respecting the Constitution, Article 1 of the Constitution, and come before Congress to make their case. Thank you. I yield back.